Good evening. My name is Shawnee Shea, and welcome to the fifth unit, the fifth week, I believe. This week we learned about different kind of ways of teaching in the classroom that allow students to interact in a more holistic way, and maybe I would say like all students become valuable, but specifically Black and Brown students don't have to experience so much violence when we practice the third space. So here I am at the third space, and some of the things that go into the third space are dialogic communication, socio-critical literacy, collaborative education. So dialogic is kind of like, both the student and the teacher communicating, not just one person communicating their own agenda. And so socio-critical literacy I really like because it uses the historicizing and basically allows for the student to become an active member in history. And so that was kind of talked about or touched upon in the study with the migrant students for the UCLA camp. And I was really impressed with the way that the author was able to show how important it is to make students actors within history, because essentially we are a part of history. So if we can start to understand that, we become far more powerful, and I think that's really important. Empowerment. Collaborative education. So collaborative education is, I have also heard about this with Tomasello, who's like collaborative thinking about his language development theory. But for me, collaboration is pretty obvious in human life. And I would think if we would step back and step out of our Western individualized thinking, we would start to see that humans are genuinely collaborative. So it makes more sense to have our education mimic, right, who we truly are. And then I'm going to jump over here into the first space. There is lack of understanding, concepts unrelated to real life, where the underlife is created. And the underlife is interesting because it must be created if you plan to survive. So I look at the underlife as a survival method. And I think it's a really beautiful thing, right? When students are creating an underlife because it shows that they're trying to survive. The teacher knows everything, the student knows nothing. The kind of banking method of teaching that was touched on, about, students being these vessels that can be filled up with information. And of course, I think that in and of itself is a violent method of teaching, someone forcing information into them, especially not information that they choose. And I have here that it's violent if that's the education space that we choose to teach in. And a linking here is teachers know everything, students know nothing. The banking method, and I'm relating that to teachers or adults guide when help is needed. So like getting that teachers and adults do have an extra part of wisdom, and that was talked about also, and that it's important that if we can collaborate, right, we can understand that there is a place for that wisdom in a classroom. So that was kind of cool to me. And I looked at the second space, or like this is kind of how I framed everything. And the student knows everything, which it leads to concepts that are unrelated to real life applications, simply because how can someone who doesn't have that wisdom know what to do with the items that are being given? And that was also spoken about really for me really well, and it was something that I hadn't really considered completely. ZOPD, so Zo for wise man and pedagogy for the teaching. And I kind of felt like that's a way that socio-critical literacy, like being able to make the person the actor and making culture the actor, and also collaborative education comes together, right, with this second space concepts unrelated to real life application. So how do you apply these things that we're trying to conceptualize, these ideas? And I think that ZOPD is a great way to do that. So I kind of threw that in there also. And that's pretty much it. I framed everything in the spaces because I felt like that's where the different methods and ideas that we talked about, that's where they fit for me. So once again, thanks for listening, and I had a wonderful week of class this week.